guys, welcome back to Martin's Daughter. Today I have a fabulous conversation with Nicole Solis. Nicole is a kindred spirit in that she's really fighting for our kids. In fact, she's one of the original fighters who brought a lot of this to the forefront. So without further ado, welcome, Nicole.
Hi, I'm so glad to finally be here.
I'm just so glad to find people out there who can bring a face to the narrative. And so I wanted to bring on people who can give you the truth about what's really going on and who we are, and you can decide for yourself. Do we seem like terrorists to you? So Nicole, how did you get started in this whole thing?
I just got started by enrolling my daughter in her public school district. She's entering kindergarten, and around the time that George Floyd died, my school put out this really highly politicized message saying that the whole district was systemically racist and they wanted to rid the district of systemic inequity. They stand with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and they were making this huge political statement about something very controversial. And a year later, when I enrolled my daughter, I thought, oh, are they doing this thing that I'm hearing about with like anti-racism, which is really just racism and, gender theory? And so I called to ask, and sure enough, they were. And they were very nervous. I was speaking to the principal. They didn't really want to tell me anything. They said that they don't call kids boys and girls like in the whole school, starting in kindergarten, that they embed the values of gender identity into the classroom. And when I talked about anti-racism, because at that time, I thought anti-racism was this new radical philosophy. I didn't understand yet that it was part of critical race theory. The principal said that they do teach this stuff and they do it in practices. In kindergarten, they ask kids what could have been done differently on Thanksgiving, which is a ridiculous question. It shames kids for their American heritage because it's sending the message that something should have been done differently on Thanksgiving and that something was wrong with this holiday. They didn't want to answer any of my questions. They told me to submit public records requests. They wouldn't answer my questions in email. And when I did, submit hundreds of questions, because again, this was the only way they would engage me. My school then held a public school board meeting threatening to sue me, and they discussed in front of hundreds of people my moral character, like who I am. I mean, I was like a nobody in my community. I just moved here 5 years ago when I had kids, and they discussed openly wanting to sue me for all these public records requests that I submitted. They put them on the board. It was a true trial. A kangaroo trial. It was a struggle session, and a struggle session is this spectacle that a government puts on in order to humiliate a member of the public. And my school did that. I mean, it was like a communist struggle session. It went on for 4 or 5 hours. They had people speak against me. It was just just amazing that happened. You can see the whole thing on YouTube. You can look up the trial of Nicole Solis. People are cheering for me, booing the school board. Just amazing. They decided not to sue me, probably because they knew that they were going to get into a lot of trouble if they did, because I got ahead of the ball. I contacted the media. I knew what they were trying to do to me, that they were trying to cancel me. And so I decided to fight back. Since then, for a year, I've just been running the media circuit to try to tell my story, because then it got better. I got sued by the teachers union, the NEA, for submitting these public records requests. That became a national story. And they're suing me because they are alleging that if information comes out about critical race theory in my school district, that the teachers will be at risk of harassment by national conservative groups. So this is this, common line that leftists use all the time of, well, you can't know what's going on. You can't do anything about it because other people are unsafe, right? That's always what they're going to try to say. And they're going to try to turn it on you to make it seem like you're some aggressor just because you want to know what your kids are learning in school. So here I am now. I've met some amazing people, like-minded people. There are more of us than there are of them. They're trying to call us every name in the book, including domestic terrorist, threat to national security. And like, all we want to do, as parents is know what our kids are learning in school and have an open debate about whether this is good, because our side obviously says it is not good to indoctrinate our kids politically. It is not good to teach our kids to judge each other on the basis of race. And it is not good to brainwash our kids into believing that they can change their sex.
I think it's important to point out that you said kindergarten.
Yeah.
This is starting in kindergarten.
Yeah.
So do you come from activist roots beforehand?
No, I don't have any family in politics. I've never done activism. This didn't strike me as activism. I was just a mom that wanted to know what my daughter was going to be taught in school. And it was just like mind boggling to me that I couldn't know what my daughter was going to I just like couldn't get past that. I'm not someone who's just going to be like, oh, this is weird. I guess I'll just send her on her first, like, no way. I couldn't, I couldn't get a tour of the school. I couldn't see the inside of it. I couldn't meet a teacher. And this was like my first baby, like the idea that I would just drop my baby off at a building, not know the people, not know what it looked like, not that was just like so like counter instinctual. I'm
Right.
like, who are you people? I gotta know, like, you have my baby, that's my life. So I think that they thought that I would just go away. And I don't know, maybe other parents do that. I don't really know because I didn't, at that time, I didn't know a lot of parents in my school district, but I didn't care I didn't even think about what are people going to think of me? How are people going to respond? I was just like, this is my baby. I want to know what's going on. And I just moved forward with that.
Right. Which is what I think the majority of people do. The majority of people who are caring and concerned about their children do. So are you the kind of parent who like intended to be involved in school? Like you would have been on the PTA kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I would have been volunteering in the class. I'm a stay at home mom. I mean, I have a younger son who's 3, so I have limited ability to volunteer because he's home with me. But like, I wanted to be involved. I chose to stay home because I want to be involved in my kid's life. I just started being a lawyer when I got pregnant, and I decided, once I had kids, I didn't want to have a life of working as a lawyer and being a mom. So yeah, I mean, I had every intention in the world of being involved with everything I could.
So they had no idea when they kicked the hornet's nest that they were dealing with an intelligent woman who was going to fight back.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I really just don't know what they were thinking. And I think they're so prideful and they have so much hubris that I think even if they knew everything about me, I think they still would have moved ahead and done this because I think they've gotten away with so much bullying of parents for so long. I think that they think they can take anyone on.
So were you always conservative?
No, I mean, I was like a bleeding heart liberal. I mean, before I went to law school, I worked in theater. I had a, yeah, I mean, I still love theater, I worked in incredibly diverse workplaces. I mean, and like, I actually remember when I was younger getting interviewed and I was asked like, how do you deal with diversity? And I was like, what? Because diversity was just such a part of my life all the time. I was like, what do you mean deal with it? Like I just like didn't know how to answer the question because I was like always around diverse groups of people. So all of this stuff with critical race theory that parades as championing diversity is I think instinctually just like your alarm bells go off if you're someone who is already comfortable in diversity because you know that it's not really championing diversity. Instead, it is trying to create a hierarchy. It's not about equality. It's about hierarchy, and it wants to divide people, not unite them.
Right. Yeah, it has been the most backwards time. I don't always want to go into the politics when I have these discussions because I'm more interested in the person's life and what's going on behind them. But I can't after what we saw yesterday. All of the projection, the constant, we are here to divide. We are not the party of grievance. I'm sitting there going, yes, yes, you are. You are definitely the party of grievance. If you weren't, I would be back to being my quiet little self who comes out of the woodwork to do children's theater and then goes back into my quiet little self for the rest of the year. Instead, they bring out this stuff, and you're just like, everything, literally everything that was said, it was a checklist of what the left is doing.
It's truly like it's a tactic, and I'm not an expert here, but like it's definitely a tactic of like psychotic people that you just keep gaslighting the other side and projecting what you're doing that is truly an abuse tactic onto other people. It's like it's like looking someone in the face and being like, stop abusing me. And you're sitting here going, you're abusing me.
Yeah, it's more like not just looking, but like getting punched in the face where they're like, why are you hurting me?
Yes.
That's exactly
Totally.
how.
They're like, stop hitting me, stop hitting me. And you're just like, what?
Yeah, my jaw, I didn't think it could drop any further than it did yesterday. This attack on us as parents, they just decided in my state to create a department of family values. Mhm, at the federal level. And I'm like, what does that even mean?
What does that even mean?
Like, keep your hands off of our kids, off of our families. As a family, you get to decide. And quite frankly, supposedly we have a conservative governor. But I'm like, so why do they want to have a larger government? I don't understand. I don't understand a conservative governor taking that stance. And I wonder what that means. How much more of it is that a threat to our rights as parents?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think any government body that creates a arm that proclaims to be administering family values in some way is alarming, because um, there's a division between government and family, much like there's a division between government and religion. And our values are not supposed to be dictated by the government. You know, your family is your own little unit, and you're the president of your family. It's like, that's your government unit, right? So
Yeah,
now to have this higher branch, I mean, imply that they're going to be dictate. I mean, that's how I take it. That okay,
right.
there's a vision of it, you know, because this isn't like child and family services where they come in if children are being abused or neglected. This is something different, and I don't really know what they have in store, but it sounds a lot like, you know, the Ministry of Truth that the federal government tried to roll out, and at least that flopped very fast.
Right.
So we'll have to see what happens in Utah.
Yeah. So where was the switch for you in terms of?
Um, you know, around the time that I decided to go to law school, I could feel my values changing a little bit, but it wasn't anything big. I was president of law students for reproductive justice in law school. I mean, I can't say that I was like totally passionate about it, but I had no idea like what social justice really meant. I thought it was just being pro-choice. And you know, I easily, it's like embarrassing to say now, but like I easily bought into all of these party lines, because personally I am someone who doesn't want the little guy to be trampled on by an oppressor, right? By like a government that's trying to keep them down. You know, I sort of like, I think we all can relate to that. It's a very seductive philosophy to say that like we got to stand up for the little guy.
Right.
But then you know, as I went through law school and became a mom, really, that was really a big change. I think when you have your own kids, you start to see things more clearly. Um, is when I realized, like, oh, wait a second, the little guy is, I, if I want to stand up for the little guy, that's actually standing up for conservative values, because that's really more of a true minority in America, and that's really, those are the values that really support freedom in America. So I sort of changed from wanting to, you know, put my energy into, I just started to realize that freedom above all was really the most effective way to ensure that people are not oppressed.
I agree, but then I saw recently in Portland, they were saying freedom is selfishness. Why are young people, what is attractive about believing that freedom is somehow oppressive?
Because I think it again feeds into the Marxist religion, that there is this other truth, and like there, the other truth is that everyone is somehow a prisoner because of their identity, you know, whatever identity that is. You know, in Marxism it's like the worker, right?
Right.
Now we have this new neo-Marxism in America, where it's your race that is keeping you imprisoned, or your gender. And I think that it's very natural for young people to feel like they're being held back because they haven't experienced legitimacy in society yet. They're still trying to establish themselves as legitimate adults that can contribute to society, and believing that like you're being oppressed and you have something to fight against, that's easier to do than just like kind of make your own way in life and take responsibility for your own actions, and not blame other people for any of your shortcomings or failures. So
Right.
I think it's a very easy, seductive thing to start believing in, especially if you're young and vulnerable and kind of insecure about where you are in life.
And really kind of manipulated.
Exactly.
Because it seems to me, these kids who are so excited about the fact that they're getting ten to $20,000 forgiven don't realize that when they get out into the workforce, they're the ones who will be paying that back. And they don't realize the truth of like there's a hierarchy to all of this. And if you are not a Black trans male to female, you're not on the top of the hierarchy. So at some point, you are the oppressor. So what do you think is the most harmful thing that's happening in our schools right now? The most harmful?
Gender ideology, hands down. Because and that and that's something that I think even people who might be true believers in critical race theory, I think that's something that also might be a unifying thing between two sides here, because they're telling children that they can change their sex, and that will send them down a path that will destroy their bodies, minds, and souls, because it starts with this nice soft sounding idea of like, oh, just use different pronouns for different people, and maybe you have pronouns, maybe you're really a boy, why don't you try it on? But it's a psychological brainwashing and manipulation that will change the way the kids will view themselves and each other. I mean, forever. I think it's going to do permanent damage. Even if you are someone who just like tries on this pronoun thing, I couldn't imagine being like 13 or 10 and like starting to believe that I was a boy, and like what ripple effect that would have on me as I sexually developed, socially developed. I mean, you don't know. I mean, there are things that, I'm almost 40. I look back on when I was 13 and I was like, oh, that did have an effect on me. I didn't even realize it until now. And it was nothing as traumatic as like using some pronouns. So I don't think we're going to see the effects of this for much later. And what parents, and I think even a lot of teachers and schools don't understand, is that the pronouns are the gateway to medicalization, because then they're having kids believe that they are the opposite sex. They're brainwashing them. And then they're diverting them to get hormones. Girls are injecting testosterone. You get high off testosterone, right? Remember when we were in school, that was doing steroids, right? To get like muscle, you get aggressive and irritable, and then you dive into depression. I mean, this is a real drug use, and they're telling kids it's good for them. You don't need mental screening to get it. You can just go to certain Planned Parenthoods, and they'll see you for like one appointment, 1.5 appointments, and you can get hormones. You can do this without parental consent in a lot of states. In Rhode Island, if you're 16, you can get hormones. In a lot of cases, insurance will cover it and then not tell you what treatments your kids are getting. And then finally, the end game of this is sterilization. That is the outcome of all of this, because kids are then becoming adults, and in some cases they're still children, like in Boston Children's Hospital at 17 they're getting sex change surgery, which they very very cutely call gender affirming surgery. Remember, this all used to be called sex reassignment surgery, and notice how they keep changing the language to make it sound nicer and nicer, when really it's horrific. So with the boys, they will, I mean, how graphic can I get? Is this going on YouTube?
No, get graphic. Yeah, I'm okay. I don't care.
Okay. So, just to like let everyone know where this goes, is that once the kids are brainwashed and they become adults that totally buy into this, the end game is to get the sex change surgery. The boys, they slice open their penises, peel it back, and make it look like a neo-vagina. They carve out a fake vaginal canal. Sometimes they have to use tissue from the colon, and then the vaginal canal can leak fecal fluid, and it has a terrible smell. These are this is a fake body part, a fake sex organ that cannot function sexually. They have to keep dilating the vaginal canal. I mean, in some cases for now, and then with the girls, what they do is they will use tissue from the arm that they then harvest to create a fake penis and attach it to girls or women. And they all end up without sexual function. Other health problems. You could be catheterized for the rest of your life because You can't now urinate properly. And this is all starting, this brainwashing, in school, right? That this is not some niche medical problem. This is the schools planting the seeds in kids' minds that they could be the opposite sex. And it is pseudoscientific. There is not scientific consensus about this, but the media suppresses it. And they suppress it in the name of non-discrimination and kindness. But how kind is it to sterilize children, to lead people to believe that they're born in the wrong body, and to start telling that to children starting in kindergarten, that they might be.
Basically, that you're telling them there's something wrong with you,
Mhm.
which is a terrible thing to tell a child, that there's something wrong with you to start with. And then you're also taking them and you erase the people, because nobody has that conversation about the people, especially the young girls who do the top surgery and then feel so much regret, and they don't even continue with the bottom surgery. So then they're a half whatever they are.
Right.
And nobody will have the conversation, because the second that you start to have the conversation, they say, you even speaking those words causes harm. And I'm like, no, the truth should not cause harm. Anybody who's going through this, they should see those surgeries first. They should show them, and they should have them watch a compilation of people like Blair White, who's happy with what they've done, to people who regret it, to the amounts of suicides. We don't have those conversations because we're being silenced. And meanwhile, the goal really is sterilize our kids. And why? And why does the government jump on the idea of sterilizing our kids? One, why do teachers support it? Why do parents support it? So I hope you're keeping these in mind. Why do parents support it? Because I think when it comes to parents, it's two things. One, they're afraid and they've been bullied. They've been bullied into, I don't want to lose my kid. And the other thing is kind of a strange version of Munchausen. So just like people who buy into this themselves, it's part of their ideology, and they're fine with doing it for their kids because they buy into it to such a point that I would say that it is a mental disorder on the parents' behalf.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence of Munchausen by proxy syndrome happening. And you also have to remember that parents are being told by medical professionals and state officials like CPS, who could take their kids away, that if they don't affirm their child's new gender, they're being told that their kid is going to commit suicide. So they're emotionally blackmailing parents into two choices. Number one, basically destroy your kid by affirming this pseudoscience. Or number two, your kid's going to die if you don't do it. And so parents are put in this position where it's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to lose my kid either way. Well, at least my kid won't die if I affirm their gender. And they're being lied to about the suicide rate. They're being lied to about what contributes to suicidality when it comes to a legitimate gender dysphoria case. And there are radical political nonprofit groups that are involved here and that are funding all of this. I mean, even my pediatrician, who ended up discharging my kids because I complained about their ideology, had a sticker up, a transgender sticker that said safe space. It said gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation on the sticker. And my daughter was in kindergarten. We went to go for a checkup, and it has all these words on the sticker that my daughter's never heard of. She's never heard of the word sex. She's in kindergarten, but she's learning to read. And she was like, Mommy, what do those words say? And of course I was livid. I said I needed a room without this sticker, like, because my daughter's only going to get older and better at reading. She's already reading signs. She can't go to the doctor's office and suddenly be like, sexual orientation. What's sex? What, like, that is a decision. When I want to talk to my daughter about sex, every
Your
parent,
business. It's your business.
But now we're having even pediatricians that are interfering in our parenting. And before, there has always been a boundary between pediatrics and parenting, because some of these lines bleed. You could go in, especially if you're a first time mom and you're nervous and anxious, you could be like, what do I do? What do I do in this case? And a lot of the times the pediatrician might say, well, that's a parenting decision. There's not really a pediatric answer for that. It's up to you. Now you go to the pediatrician, they got every parenting answer for you. They're going to tell you how to be a parent, including their, including whether you believe in transgenderism or not. That's all going to be part of them like wagging their finger at you. And so that's something else parents need to look out for, is how your pediatric practice is interfering in your own parenting decisions.
So do you just, because this is how I am, I'm so blunt. I will walk in and I will be like, are you woke? Because if you're woke, we'll just go to another doctor. I did the same thing with religious, like for churches. I walk in and I when we found our church, I walked into my pastor and I said, so we're a biracial family. We're not interested in being your token. And I'd like to know if you're woke. Do you believe in social justice or biblical justice?
I mean, like ask them directly. And, I didn't do that with my doctor because it didn't like strike me to do it with my doctor, but I did it with the new school that I ended up bringing my daughter to. So I got a tour of a Catholic school and I was like, look, I'm coming here because of this is what's going on in my public school. If you do that, I'm not interested. And they were very upfront with me. And that's what you do nowadays, and I didn't used to be like that. I didn't used to be like, you got to believe what I believe, right? Because that's not the point of diversity. I thought diversity was we can all get along and believe different things. But now apparently we can't, because we're going to be like silenced, bullied, canceled, harassed. So now I got to know whose side you're on, because I'm not interested in you interfering in my family.
We're not interested in you defining what good is.
Exactly.
And because that is the problem. It used to be, and that's just a valid point to talk about. It used to be, I'm the same way. I'm super open-minded, you can think the way you can. I can be friends with people who are different faiths. It doesn't matter to me. None of that matters. But when you are taught that your way is the only good, and that it doesn't matter what you do because you're doing it for the greater good, then you become a threat.
Yeah.
And that's really sad, because like we have to build community. I don't want to be a person who's only seeking out the like-minded.
Right.
And unfortunately, whether it's intentional or not, and I'm inclined to believe it is intentional, we are being pushed into boxes of you are on this side and you are on this side. And I think that we have to fight that, because if we don't, we will see ourselves in a war, or our children will definitely see themselves in a war or ostracized. I mean, some of the things that I heard yesterday made me feel like, are they going to bring the stars out and have us start putting them on the side of our clothes?
I mean, yeah, like, I believe that speech that Biden gave, claiming that all MAGA Republicans, which by the way are like 75 million voters that voted for Trump, labeling them as like a threat to democracy, I think that was all meant to incite some kind of illegal action on our side. I think they're constantly trying to stoke us to misstep, so that way they can have a reason to be like, now we got to put you all in jail. Oh, now we got to investigate you. They're trying to bait us.
Right.
We have, obviously not take the bait. Now, luckily for us as conservatives, we don't really react, in that way. The other side is more reactive. So I think it's hard to bait us in that way. But once you start messing with people's kids, it's very difficult to hear the president of the United States labeling someone like you as a threat.
Right.
Like a national security threat, just because you want to know what's being taught and you object to radical ideology in school.
Yeah. I never went to schools and protested masks. I never went to schools and yelled and screamed at anyone. I'm not that person. I'm not going to be like, it's not who I am. I believe in rising above and having that moral. I believe that if I have a certain moral character, then it's going to make sure that people are more likely to listen to me. And as I've said before in other podcasts, I very much worry about getting that label of the angry Black woman. So I work so much harder to be positive and happy and wear yellow and all of these things, because I feel like I have to work at it. Even though I feel the same kind of boiling up and rage. And like, I was so angry listening to that yesterday, because it was like, you're teaching people. And what I posted on Facebook was, last night, Nazis were created on both sides.
Yep.
You just push people further this way and further this way. And that having that conversation in the middle or getting to the truth is going to be that much harder.
Yep.
All of the news stations, the mainstream media was saying, no lies detected. I'm like, are you serious? Because guess what? Again, we didn't push the grievance culture. We don't want grievance culture. Personally, I want my child to have the best and fullest, most complete education possible. And you're frozen. You are frozen.
Oh, I'm back.
You're back. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I want my child to have the best, most complete, most full education possible. I want him to think of different people as a box of crayons. Like, just, I want him to embrace diversity like that. Now he's older, so the box of crayon analogy is probably better suited for your child. But I want him, the box of crayon analogy.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, we all color a picture and it's made more beautiful with all the different colors that we use in the picture, right? That's a classical liberal way of looking at life.
Right.
Not, all the trees, but if they're brown, they better be the right shade of brown. And
Right.
And this projection, these complete lies about us, I think, are extremely dangerous. I saw recently where they called us maggots. People in high-up government, maggots.
It's one thing to have political strife between two parties, and it's just everyday people that are arguing. But this is the highest level of government that is targeting one group of people. We've seen this happen before. We've seen throughout history politicians give impassioned speeches that are meant to cast a shadow on a single group of people. And the way these tyrants are successful is by making you believe they're right? Like, when you think back to speeches by like all the evildoers in history that targeted select groups of people, they're, when you learn about like the Holocaust in school, I remember as a kid being like, he just gave these speeches and they just like went along with it. Like, what? I don't, and really what they do is they spend a lot of time slowly manipulating people and convincing them that this like totally extreme idea, like, oh, it might be reasonable. What about this? And it's so manipulative. And so I think that's what's happening now, is that they're tapping into ideas that the other side might have about conservatives, and then like springboarding it to, well, therefore they're a threat to national security. So they'll take some kernel of truth and then explode it into something that is completely false. And then they kind of created a new extremist themselves on their side.
Well, that's part of the problem, is that you can't say that we're extremists and we're a threat when we can't say, no, we're not okay with family drag shows, while they have Antifa dressed head to toe, covered in black, with assault rifles.
Right.
And ignore it, and they completely ignore it. And you're like, hey, I'm a terrorist in my yellow sweater with my information, with my books, with my files. I'm a terrorist, but that's not
right.
Because when I drive around that and I see that, I lived in Seattle, when Chaz and and so when you see that, I mean, we lived under terrorists.
Oh yeah.
You had no idea if you went to the grocery store, were you going to get beat at? Were you going to get spit at? Was somebody going to throw, this is disgusting, but was somebody going to throw a used maxi pad at you?
Ah,
That's what was going on. And yet we're the terrorists because we go in and we say, I want to volunteer in my classroom. I want to make sure that my kid is learning accurate history. Don't teach my kid critical race theory. Study who Kimberly Crenshaw is before you bring in her points of intersectionality. Like, do your homework. That's all I'm asking you to do. Be transparent. Show us what your curriculum is. Don't lie to us. That's all we're asking for.
exactly. And you know, you really, I don't understand the other side when I try to impress upon them that there's no transparency. I mean, let's just stop and say, well, let's say we disagree. You know, one person thinks critical race theory is awesome. I think it's horrific. Shouldn't we at least know what they're like? Can we just see it all together?
Yep.
So, and I think the fact that schools stonewall parents and the fact that the other side doesn't even want transparency shows you their vulnerability, because they know that if you could see it all every day, that you could so easily attack it. You could so
Right.
easily show all of its pitfalls to everyone, and that you would even convince believers to not believe in it anymore. So that's why they hide it, because I think on some level they know it is so highly controversial and wrong that they don't want it out in the open. They have to do it in secret.
Yeah, they have to do so much in secret. Back to Antifa, covering themselves. When I see Antifa completely covered up, I think the difference between the KKK and you are the
Right.
color you chose to hide yourself in. And the same thing with this curriculum. Like, show us it.
Yeah.
We were trying to pass the bill of transparency. All we said is that we want teachers to have to send us a copy. Send your parents a copy of what the curriculum is going to be for that week. It's really not that hard. I was a para last year. You can easily have an assistant or even a parent. I run a parent group, and I know that parents would go in and say, oh, here, I'll do it for you. Scan it and do it. And I also know, in all fairness, I know teachers who are like, sounds great. Let's build that relationship, because there's also the fact that we get projected on us, the parents who are like, how can I help? I want to be part of my child's education. These are my babies, you know. And then there's parents who could care less. All they want is their kids back in school. So they might have seemed like activists 2 years ago, but as soon as their kids are back in school, they don't care. And their kids are acting like little crapheads. They really are. I'm sorry to be blunt, but I have a friend who is a teacher, and she's been told F you more than 50 times in the last 2 weeks. She counts a tally. So more than 50 times. And when she calls a parent and says, so this happened, the parent says, I can't control my kid. So all of that projection comes on our kind of parenting. And that's not who we are. So people need to understand that the majority of the parents who are in this, who are fighting, who are risking their reputations, who are getting threats of violence against them, as I'm sure you have, are, you know, we're not those people.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, I see like just lies posted about me just to try to plant seeds of doubt in people's minds, because I think anyone who's on the fence about this political fight, if they see something on the internet, they're like, oh, I don't know if that's true, maybe I should go look into it. It's a diversion tactic. And with the threats of violence, I have not gotten any threats of violence.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I would like run to the police, and I would spend a lot of my life tracking down that threat of violence, because I think people who make those threats of violence belong in jail. Like that's not something to take lightly. So I just want to say, any parent that gets that is the next thing you must do is make a police report and then do everything you can to keep your family safe. I mean, the one thing I did do, I installed a security system in my home. I have cameras around. Um, so, I mean, I did take some steps because I did feel a little vulnerable, but I want to reassure your listeners that I've only gotten positive feedback in the real world, right? The internet is for kind of all the big talkers who want to, say all their mean tweets. But when I go out in the real world, people stop me in the grocery store. They say thank you to me. I have teachers that reached out to me that I had when I was like 10 like junior high school teachers, some high school teacher. I mean, friends that I haven't even thought about since I was 8 that are contacting me on Facebook. So I just want to let everyone know the positive side to this, which is you do get more support than you get pushback. And that is just something to think about if you're thinking about fighting back too, because there's more reward than there is retaliation.
I love that. Um, what can people do to fight back? How do you suggest that they?
So, what I did, uh, I'm going to say what I did because there's really no playbook to win this war, right? No war has a like do this, and then you win because it truly is a cultural war. So what I did is I created a private Facebook group, and we're all in Facebook groups now too. But I utilized it to just post evidence of what I was seeing. So I didn't post memes. I tried to stay on point. I just wanted the evidence. And I was doing that with my public records request to be like, all right, here's what I found. Look at this. This is what I think about it. And then I vetted people to enter my group. Um, I do think this is a bipartisan fight when we're fighting for our kids, but right now it's not. I think we definitely have people on different sides here. So I went on people's Facebook pages and I was vetting them. And I'm like, I don't know if you're like loving Biden, I'm not going to let you into my group because when you let the wrong people into your group, they're going to try to shut your group down. They'll like report you for fake hate stuff. And, that's just another way to silence you. And that's why you got to be careful. And then eventually, when you get enough people in your group, they'll start posting evidence. And then you reach out to them and be like, oh, did that happen in your school? Can you send me the evidence? And now what I do is I use social media to see other people posting evidence, and I'm looking for legal claims. Because at the end of the day, schools don't listen to parents, but they listen to lawsuits. And we have the law on our side because we have anti-discrimination laws that those are the ones that are supposed to support diversity and equality. And if your school is discriminating against you on the basis of race or sex or any other thing that, compelled speech, um, parents have to file lawsuits because we need to scare schools. They need to have something at stake. Lawsuits are expensive and they're not going to listen to you. They're going to listen to like their bank account that's draining. And number two, we need to have precedents. So when we have parents filing lawsuits about, compelled speech with pronouns, brainwashing our kids with gender theory, passing kids based on equity when really they failed and then they're getting a B because of their race, which schools in Providence are doing. I'm not making that up. You establish precedent with a lawsuit that a judge will find against them, hopefully if our country hasn't devolved by that point. And it's going to be harder for a school to justify bad behavior after they lost lawsuits. So there are organizations out there to help parents. You just need the right plaintiff and the right claim. So my recommendation to sum it all up, make those Facebook groups, post evidence, documents, tell stories about what's happening, talk to your kids, and then make alliances and then encourage each other to support each other to file those lawsuits. So that way we can start turning the tide in an effective and meaningful way. I think we're at a point where we all know critical race theory is happening. We know gender theory is happening in school, but now we got to take action. And in my opinion, and most of other people's opinions, lawsuits are what have to happen, or some other political maneuver to stop the bad behavior, to stop the indoctrination.
Like talking to the press.
Talking to the press, going public. The whole reason why I got pro bono legal representation is because I entered the media, and an organization saw me and they said, okay, she can talk, she's not crazy, she's presentable, she'd be a good client. And that's what especially nonprofit lawyers are looking for. They want a good claim, and they also want a plaintiff that they can represent, that makes them look good too.
Right.
And because I know it's scary, like parents are like, how am I going to afford a lawsuit? I don't have $100,000 to throw away. Well, you can afford it if you have a organization that's representing you for free.
So how about what I've found here is a lot of people simply don't believe it. And it is very glossed over. It's very, very subtle. What should parents look for when they're when they really have no idea? But like somebody told me the other day that their kid came home with a intersectionality flower power, and all the petals they were supposed to fill out. And so it looks adorable. And they're just supposed to fill out information about themselves. But that information is who you are and what the systems of oppression are all around the petal.
Anything like that, I mean, that's a prime example. Anything that has to do with identity, that is the beginning of priming for critical race theory and social emotional learning. Because if you take a step back and think about it, it shouldn't matter who you are when you go to school, right? You should be able to learn algebra, to learn how to read, to learn how to write without having to divulge all of this personal information about yourself. I mean, I couldn't imagine going to school at like 12 years old and someone being like, let's talk about you. Like, you're 12, you're like, this is junior high school and it's scary. I don't want to talk about me. I just want to do my work. And obviously to some kids that might be like, oh, good, then I don't have to do schoolwork. Let's talk about me. But none of that is academic. And you
Right.
should question anything that is not academic, because school is not meant for identity group therapy, right? If you want to talk about your identity and what that means to you, maybe get a therapist or talk about it in your family. Families that you can have conversations about who you are and what you believe, you should be having those conversations first. Another thing I recommend is tell your kid that they don't feel safe talking about that in school. Public school is the government. They should not be invading their privacy and asking them to talk about their gender or their race or their culture. These are private matters. You shouldn't have to be put in this vulnerable position with a stranger who's an agent of the government.
Well, and doesn't that get a little tricky because, like, when you're in kindergarten, first grade, elementary school, you have student of the week, and you bring in a picture of yourself, and you say all of these things about you, and that's been happening since I was a kid, right? So,
Well, I mean, is it student of the week because you read your first book, or, were they like things that you did as a student? If it's student of the week because you are, I mean, oh God, I don't know. I'd have to make up something. Um, I mean, unless you,
it's oftentimes like, this is a picture of my house, and this is a picture of my pet, and this is my family, and my family comes from this. A lot of times they'll do like a country report. Where's your country of origin? To
yeah, I
me,
hate that. I totally hate that, because when my daughter was in preschool, they had to do that, and they had to say all of their like ethnicities.
yeah,
And the fact of the matter is my family is not particularly like connected to our heritage. Like, even as a kid, like, I'm just American. Like,
right.
yes, we all come from different countries because America's a melting pot, but I don't have any cultural things I do other than being culturally American. So
I was
I
bringing an apple pie then.
totally, but I actually remember going through that as a kid and being like feeling very insecure, because I was like, I don't do anything that's, ethnicity or culture. And
Right.
for me, it was an upsetting experience, because everyone else came in with their like Italian heritage and their Chinese heritage, and this is the food they eat and the clothes they wear. And I was just like, I'm just American. I don't know. I don't do any of that. So, like, okay, we can all be proud of it and stuff, but I still think it's a really weird thing to do in school, because it's based on this whole premise that we should be doing something culturally and we have to talk about it with each other, when really not everyone's in that boat.
It's
And
interesting because it is like, I've never thought of it as invasive before. Like, I've taken a picture with my child's stuffed animal and whatever else, and this is a little bit about my kid. And I never thought of that as invasive, but now I do. And then you're like, are we now looking for every little thing, or were they always heading in this direction?
I don't know. I mean, like, a picture with a teddy bear, fine. But like in my preschool, everyone marched around with a flag of their country of origin. And
Hmm.
like I had to pick a country of origin for my own daughter. And, I didn't want to like make it a big deal. I was like, whatever, it's a preschool thing they're doing. And I was like, look, here's the 10 places my kid it
Yeah.
can go.
You're like,
And
I'm a mutt.
it's like, I truly am a mutt. I was like, so you pick, I don't know, pick a flag, tell me. Like I was
Right.
just trying to be cooperative. So
Well,
um,
and then it becomes, are you dividing people based on this?
and
Like
that's
they're preschool things where they're literally showing them, well, you should sit in this room because, or in this on this rug because you've got brown hair. And you should sit on this one because you have yellow hair, and that becomes dangerous, I think, because that starts showing these kids what collective they fit into.
exactly, because I think you're never going to get away from the outcome, which is making kids identify with a group instead of their individual value. Because at the end of the day, it's fine that we all come from all other places, but if you focus on it too much, you're sending the wrong message.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is what's too much.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, like, cultural day and having the kids, celebrate, as long as it's all equal. Like I when they do privilege walks, those are horrific. Those are horrific. And you could do the opposite. You could ask the kids, who had pizza for dinner this week? What can we find that unifies us?
Exactly.
Instead of specifically going after what divides us.
Exactly.
So when it comes to, I'm just trying to think, when it comes to our parents protecting our kids, we can do lawsuits, but quite frankly, a lot of people, especially religious people, are not inclined to sue. How do they find the support that they need? What other things can they do? I mean, and also, let's just be real. We have no idea with this current political climate if our lawsuits are going to win, because a lot of people are in those offices to make sure we don't. So what's the hope there?
Well,
How do we protect our kids?
yeah, I mean, there are other things you can do. Like, for example, more practical things you can do is you can submit public records requests to see the curriculum and other lesson plans. You should also be trying to cultivate good relationships with your teacher. All of your kids' teachers, maybe have meetings with them and say, I just want to let you know we're really happy to be here, and we, you might want to just say, like, we're a religious family, and these are our values, and I just want to make sure that we're not going to be learning anything in public school that is going to be I'm trying to find the right word, but really like violating your religious beliefs, right? I mean, you can learn things that aren't exactly in line with your religion. That's the whole point of going to a secular school. But you just want to make sure that there's nothing going on in class like gender theory. You can just put it out there to avoid conflict preemptively, and let the teacher know that you don't want gender pronouns applied to your kid. You don't want your kid to be asked about pronouns. You can send opt-out forms to your school. You can go to courageisahabit.org. They have all the forms that you can download and then send to your school saying that you don't want to participate in surveys. Surveys are administered to kids in order to data mine. It's asking them invasive questions a lot of the times about their politics, their sexuality, their gender, their race, their parents. And parents have to be notified when these surveys are given, but a lot of the time, schools are not sending notices. You'll just have your kid come home and say that they took this survey. A lot of times these surveys introduce kids to concepts that they're not ready to be introduced to, especially when it comes to sex. And so it's introducing them to things that they're not ready for. And then they're going to come home and ask you questions, or worse, ask their friends questions and then get the wrong information. So opting out of surveys is a really, really big deal, because it's a way to cut off the bloodline of critical race theory and social emotional learning. If they don't have the data, then they don't have the justification to infect your school district with more and more indoctrination, because this is a really simple cycle. What they do is they give your kids a survey, and they are biased questions with very limited answers. It'll say, like, are there ever days that you go to school and you just feel sad all the time? Well, if you're 15, probably, because you're 15, but they're going to, take that answer, yes, and they're going to be like, oh, now kids need social emotional learning to help regulate their emotions in school, and they're going to use that data to justify a political agenda. So if you have the kids stop taking the surveys, it's going to be very hard for them to then take all this data and then get funding from either the government or nonprofit groups and saying, look, we are eligible for your services for social emotional learning and critical race theory, right? They don't have the data, they can't justify it. So that I just can't stress opting out of surveys enough. And then what was the one other thing I wanted to talk about? Disenrolling from public school is also a really great way to protect your kids from public school. You have to vet your private school and just ask them straight up if they do social emotional learning and anything related to critical race theory or identity politics. But really disenrolling is your best bet. And that's probably what has made me feel like I'm able to fight this, because I know my daughter is in a school where I know that she's protected and won't be targeted.
Yeah, I completely agree. I only have one more year of protection in our school because it only goes up to a certain grade. And then I'm like, so half of me is fighting this and half of me is trying to protect my child. Okay, so if people want to follow you, where do they?
Right now I'm on Facebook. It's Nicoletta Nichole. I think my name still has Nicole Solis in parentheses. I'm not sure. I used to be on Twitter, but they canceled me. And you can also check out Independent Women's Forum. I'm now a fellow with them, and they're helping get my story out there more.
Awesome.
And then, I'm sorry, what?
No, I said awesome. That's all.
Thank you. And then the Goldwater Institute is my attorney representing me in the lawsuit that the teachers union brought against me.
It's crazy. Right. It's crazy because we are supposed to be parents and teachers united for the best interest of our kids. That's what it should be.
Right.
And instead, the union, I wouldn't say every single teacher by any means, but the unions are completely against families. And that is just, that is a simple truth. That is a simple truth. And we have to protect our families at all costs.
Yes.
So,
and if there is any oppressor in this world, if we were to buy into the paradigm of the oppressor and the oppressed, it is absolutely the teachers union.
yeah.
They're the one true oppressor in this nightmare.
Yeah. Listening to Becky Pringle is I hear her for a few seconds and I'm like, I'm gonna yeah. She's hard people full of hatred.
Yeah.
Terrorizing our kids, especially when they say things like we are there for the BIPOC, we are there for the women, we are there for the queer kids, and never once do they say we are protecting Caucasian kids. And it doesn't make sense to me that anyone would go into teaching that has animosity towards a group of people, but they're the terrorists. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, have a good day.
You too.